Today I'm going to be talking about how I put together a garment with a flat fell seam. I'm making a little crop tank. This is the back, and I've already finished this portion of it, and I'm going to take my front and go step by step with you. What's great about the flat fell seam is, so I made a skirt in this fabric and I had a little bit fabric left, but I didn't have enough fabric to place my tank on the fold. So I was able to, I'll show you here, cut, this one's my front, and then I was able to cut it out on scrap fabric, and then I had to add seam allowance. So you probably need, no, you do need a 5/8 seam allowance to put this together to give you ample room. So it's a great technique when you have a pretty big chunk of fabric left, but it's not in the fold, and you want to make a tank, or you want to, even make pair shorts with the rest of the fabric, and you can piece it together with the flat fell seam. So again, this is my tank top front, and I have cut it out with leftover fabric, and then I needed to add a 5/8 seam allowance, which generally this piece would have been on the fold, but I cut it, so I need fabric to put it back together, and that's where our seam allowance comes in. Okay, so step one, we are going to sew our wrong sides together at our seam allowance. So I'm going to go sew wrong sides together at 5/8. Okay, I have now sewn it together at 5/8. You can do this on the opposite side, so I'm using my flat fell seam as a decorative stitch on the outside. You can certainly flip it and do it on your wrong side as well. I will say that when doing this, you do want to be really accurate about your measurements, because this seam right here that we just sewed is going to be apparent on the front of your garment, as well as the next one we do. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything really even and straight. Okay, so I've sewn that together at 5/8. I am going to go press this seam open. So I have pressed my seam open. Now on my right side, I am going to trim probably close to about 1/8 of the right seam only. So I'm working on the front of my garment, and I'm trimming my right side seam only. Be careful that you don't get any of your fabric caught underneath. So I'm going to trim this down to about 1/8. I have trimmed my right seam, and now I'm going to go to my iron, and I'm going to take the left seam, the one that's longer, and I'm going to press it up. It's about 1/4 inch all the way down. So you're basically pressing the seam, the longer seam, to your sew line. You don't want to go past it. You're just going to press it right to that seam line. So I'm going to go do that. So I have pressed that longer seam under 1/4 inch, and then we're going to press it again over top of that other seam that we cut down. So after we do this, it will cover that seam and have a really nice, neat little finish. And then what we'll do, I'll pin it, and then I'll show you where to sew it at. Okay, so I have pressed it again, and I put a few pins in it to hold it in place. And then you're going to sew on the edge closest to where you folded over, so we can catch all of that underneath it. And you'll sew and lock that all the way down. And then you'll have a nice finished edge. Now, if you're unsure about how it will look on your fabric, you can just take a few scrap pieces together and try it. Sometimes it doesn't really work well on thick fabric, so if you're trying to do corduroy or a wool, it's going to be too thick when you fold it over. I'm using a pretty thick linen, like a medium weight, and so I was able to do it fine on that. So I say lightweight to medium fabrics will be best for this. Okay, so I'm going to go sew that and then show you the two pieces. Okay, so I now have both sections flat fell seamed together. This is my front, and then this is my back, and then I'm going to start putting my garment together, but it's a little hard to see because my fabric and thread match so much, but when I get up close, you can see this is the little bit of a lift, like the little bit of a design element you'll have if you do it on the front. So it kind of looks like a piping in the same kind of fabric if you choose to do it on the front. If you're not sure, like I said earlier, do a sample piece on your fabric scraps to see, but you'll have a stitch down the left side and the right side of your garment. Okay, I'm going to finish it up. Let me know if you guys have any questions.